You're listening to FitPro Sessions with Parallel Coaching, Season 4, Episode number 4. Hi, I'm Neale Bergman, and in today's podcast, Hayley and I are talking all about obesity and metabolic syndrome, so stay tuned. Hi, I'm Neale Bergman.
And I'm Hayley Bergman. Over the last 10 years, we've helped thousands of fitness professionals to get qualified, learn with simplicity, and coach clients with confidence.
We're the first to say that learning and being a fit pro doesn't have to be hard work, and that with the right structure, support and resources, you can become a confident and knowledgeable fitness professional that is dedicated to more.
So how do you learn, qualify and kickstart as a fit pro? This is the FitPro Sessions Podcast with Parallel Coaching.
Today we're talking about obesity and metabolic syndrome.
It's an absolute deep dive into these two conditions that are absolutely interlinked. So it's all driven together.
But first, I'm going to apologise for my croaky,
right now,
hoarse voice.
pretty
It's not
good.
too bad. It's not
But
too
you
bad.
wait, I bet by the end you.
Yeah,
squeezing out the
completely.
words.
So I feel absolutely fine in myself. We've just spent 2 days in the classroom doing the level 2 circuit qualification, and the energy was just electric. And I could feel it by the end of the first day that my voice was starting to go. Sunday kind of put my voice completely on the back burner. And then it's kind of like now as I get excited, I feel the voice go.
Yeah.
So I don't know what this is going to sound like as it comes through iTunes and Spotify and all of the other apps you're listening to.
So don't worry, he feels fine.
Feel absolutely
just
fine.
a little croaky.
Monday morning, my voice was totally gone. And then on Tuesday, we kind of thought, well, we need to do a little bit more recording for this episode. And here we are, the day before we go live. So we're recording this. It goes live tomorrow. We're recording it a day
On
before.
the Wednesday, yeah, absolutely.
Just to kind of save the voice and get it out there. So here we go.
And we were sort of discussing, should we change what we're going to do this about? Because Neale gets so passionate about this topic that we were like, well, should we change it so it's
Completely.
not one that Neale feels like he really needs to get passionate about? But we stuck with it. So
Completely.
we are talking about metabolic conditions, in particular obesity and the metabolic syndrome,
Completely.
which might be a new word for you or a new phrase.
So we were going to put type 1 and type 2 diabetes into this one as well and talk about insulin resistance. But we thought, let's make this season 1 episode longer. And I think it will do it justice because we're going to make reference to it today. But next week, we're going to jump into type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
And insulin resistance in much more detail.
And I think then these 2 episodes back to back really do complement each other. Now, whilst I'm all up for going into like a 90-minute or 2-hour session here, I think it will just do it justice by spending more time on obesity.
Oh, and actually, as we've been planning for this, there's so many golden nuggets in today that I can't wait to share with you.
Completely.
So,
for me, I think this topic really, I've just loved working with clients that are overweight and obese. And, I was really fortunate enough as well, just over a decade ago now, to be one of the first co-writers of the Level 4 Obesity and Diabetes qualification.
Yeah.
So kind of being in that early stage of guiding that syllabus and understanding, how is a fit pro going to work and what should they or shouldn't they be doing in the capacity of working with kind of a multidisciplinary team, working with not just exercise referral, but working with the client under the bracket of kind of exercise referral. Okay.
and within that as well, what Neale used to do in terms of learning about obesity and teaching obesity when he wrote the Level 4 Obesity course, he actually worked directly with healthcare professionals as part of the Welsh National Assembly.
Yeah, completely.
And so he's kind of got several different angles that will come from this, not only from the clinical side of working with healthcare professionals, but also the hands-on approach of training thousands and thousands of guys that have been obese
and I think
or overweight.
And I think, I think most people get into this industry going, I want to help people. And the main place we help people is lose weight. I think that's probably the most common goal.
In the health and fitness industry.
In the health and fitness industry, yeah. So we're talking about losing weight. I think there needs to be, in my opinion, a lot more value and consideration placed on, well, why is that weight there in the first place? It's not just a case of, we talk about this energy balance. I'm going to jump straight in on it, but we talk about this energy balance. But is it as simple as, eat less, move more? Now, whilst that energy balance equation and that calorie deficit is one of the underpinning principles, I want us to consider that it's not just a case of working with somebody that's overweight or obese and providing that information. I genuinely don't believe that is the answer.
It's a much more long-term answer to help them adhere to their new practices.
It's a behavioural change answer. And we're talking about things like creating an energy balance. We're talking about moving more. We're talking about macro splits. We're talking about consumption of water. We're talking about lowering stress. They're all processes. But what we're talking about ultimately, which is going to make a difference, is behaviour change.
And that over time reverses the effect of what's going on in the body. And that's quite complex. What we'll talk about is a couple of... should we dive into this?
Let's go for it.
Should we talk about obesity prevalence first?
Well, let's go prevalence.
Let's go prevalence. Why not? We're here. So 28.7% of adults in England are obese.
Which is crazy.
And
which is let's just put that into perspective. It's like 70
almost
million.
A third.
Yeah, it's almost a third. So 70 million people. We're talking, 22, 23 million people
And then
fit that category.
And that's just obese. So that's BMI 30 and above.
Yeah.
There is a further, check my notes, 35.6% that are overweight, which means a total of everybody that are overweight and obese is 64.3%.
Do you know what I find quite
crazy?
Not necessarily alarming, but I always think back to I went to school in the 80s, and I remember at school there was only one or two people in my year group that were overweight.
There's one chunky kid.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, completely. You've got
it's not very PC.
It's not. So, but you've got one other person in the group. I remember, and it was that obvious that I can actually remember their name. I won't say it because they could actually be listening. Okay, so we do need to be a bit more PC here, Hayley. Okay, so but we're now. I took my nieces to school a couple of weeks back, and actually everyone in her year group. Okay,
apart from her,
not everyone. That's an exaggeration, but clearly, 2/3 of the year group were sitting in an overweight category. Okay, so my little niece is actually in the minority now, whereas I was in the majority growing up, whereby
of being in that healthy
BMI. So again, let's just talk about BMI very quickly. We're talking about the body mass index. We're talking about someone's height to weight relationship or ratio.
Which is overall volume. So you've got their height and their weight.
And their weight distributed and correlated. Now, we could easily sit here and talk about and discredit the BMI, but it's not a valid indicator and
body
whatnot.
Composition
but
changes.
Whether we like it or not as FitPros, that's what's used as a marker for someone's health and their prevalence or position of
and the
category.
Stress on the body increases with increased volume. So the more volume that person is carrying
based on their height,
on the same organs, on the same
skeletal system,
the risk and the stress on those same systems
completely
will increase.
Yes.
Whether that is made of muscle, whether it's made of fat, the stress is still there.
Completely.
So BMI does correlate. And
I think the biggest arguments we get in class or on the PT course, for example, when we talk about this, or certainly within, say, the exercise referral and level 4 obesity, is we start to make comparisons to, say, your rugby player that turns up that is, 15% or below fat percentage, however their BMI comes out of 40, and obviously that person doesn't really they do sit inside because the BMI because it's national normative data. However, you could say, well, that's not entirely relevant, I suppose.
Yeah.
But we're talking about health-related exercise here. We're talking about somebody that's inactive, somebody that's sedentary, somebody that's had a poor relationship with food, a poor relationship with moving, a poor relationship with life, so to speak, overall. And also that's why the BMI is so useful still.
And that's why the BMI is often now combined with waist circumference as well. So a waist circumference of greater than 94 centimetres for a male, 84 for a female. Then you kind of get this understanding of greater risk associated to the waist circumference.
So you could look at the waist to hip ratio. Yeah. Okay, so you could turn around. But again, you could say, for example, if there was a rugby player that came out at, say, BMI 40, okay, grade 3 obese, their hip to waist ratio probably isn't in their favour anyway. However, let's say they're playing prop position.
Might serve their purpose.
Yeah, then they've got that's what they need that for. That's why they play that position. Okay, so I think we could just chuck that argument to one side, and I really want to bring back the health to the health and fitness industry.
Yeah.
And look at the 28.7% of people that are obese rather. And the further 35% that are overweight, because ultimately that's our category of people we want to work with.
Yeah.
Those are the people who are actually hopefully wanting to or are reaching out. But oddly, we live in a time where there's more and more overweight and obese people. Yet we've got a time where we've got plentiful supply of gyms, more and more gyms, more and more diets,
more and more recipe books,
more and more, so many approaches to tackling this, yet the problem's only getting worse.
Yeah.
So again, it comes down to a behaviour change issue of why aren't these people in this position, A, reaching out in the first place, or B, ready, willing and open to tackling this.
Yeah.
Why? We're talking about basically 46 million people potentially walking around in society completely and unknowingly
at
risk in an overweight or obese position, believing to not have a problem.
Yeah. And so often the FitPro comment of why you've decided to become a FitPro in the first place is to help people. And I'm going to say the biggest pool that you can be diving into is A, those that have a large number associated to it, like what we've just said, so overweight and obese, but also have a lot to gain in that by losing weight and increasing activity, there is a huge impact on their life in terms of the benefits. So it means per person that you work with, you have a great impact. And you are able to still work with a lot of people.
Because there's a lot of people in that pool. We're talking 2/3 of the UK population become your, dare I say, your ideal client. Obviously, you could niche down a bit more and say, I just want to work with guys, or I just want to work with ladies.
Or a local area.
Or a local area, or a particular age group. But the pool of people available to you is huge.
Yes, and we've spoken before about a ripple effect. And this ripple effect is exactly the same. So that the stone you're throwing into the water is quite large in the fact that it makes a great big ripple. It's an impact on them. So by them losing weight, by them starting to get more active, be healthier, that's that stone you're throwing in, that intervention that you have, basically, that behaviour change, creates a massive ripple. But you're also throwing in lots of stones because you've got lots of clients that you're affecting.
Completely.
And I think that's really, really powerful.
But on that ripple effect, you might affect one person that might have a radical change in their weight, but that impacts their partner, husband, wife in the house, which impacts the kids, which, let's just say you change the habits and help the behaviour change of one person. You could actually go on and impact the behaviour change and habits of many people down the line, but you just don't know that. So you just got to think of a bigger picture. Yeah,
absolutely.
So obesity, we understand that the BMI is up. So we're talking 25 to 29.9 is overweight. We're talking 30 to 34.9 is grade 1, 35 to 39.9 is grade 2, and then 40 and above, we're talking grade 3.
Exactly.
Now, we also understand that you've got a hip to waist ratio that adds up to that. Okay. And then we could start to break down and say, right, in these categories, you're going to be heavier based on your height. So more volume. And with that, we're going to see that fat percentage is going up. Okay. So if you had somebody in, this is what I don't like about the BMI. It's the categorization of normal. Okay. I think everyone's normal. Everyone's normal, right?
I prefer to call it a healthy range.
But between 18 and 24.9. And so you could see the correlation between fat percentage in that zone, let's call it a zone, and a BMI. And then as BMI increases and hip to waist ratio increases,
so does fat percentage.
Okay.
Exactly agree with
that. To my knowledge, there's no data that says between certain categories is going to be a certain amount of fat percentage. Because I remember working with one lady many years ago now that from the outside actually appeared incredibly lean. She was very tall, an ectomorph, didn't really carry much visible fat. But when we did various testing in uni, actually came out that she was 58% fat.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no necessarily correlation between whether fat percentage goes up, but we know that as your BMI does go up, as does fat percentage.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I wanna go into a little bit of maths very quickly.
Oh, I hoped you were going there
Okay.
next. Okay,
And
cool.
I just what we're about to do is very crude and very basic, but I want to kind of add some depth,
Context.
some context to this. So let's just say we've got this hypothetical client. I don't know, let's call this client Mary, okay? And let's say this client is, how heavy did I work?
125 kilos.
125 kilos, okay? So
And 55% body
and
fat.
55% body fat. So we're looking at a BMI of 40 plus, 55% body fat. Mary weighs 125 kgs. So first off, we need to work out the percentage of fat to her total body mass.
So
Okay?
you can basically work out what that 55% of 125 kilos is, and you end up with 68.7 kilos
68.7. So all we've
of
done there
fat.
is go 125 divided by 100. Okay, that puts us into 1%.
1%.
Then we're going to times it by 55, and we get
8.7
68.7 kgs of Mary's body weight, okay, is fat
fat.
mass. Okay.
The rest is lean mass.
So we know that 1 kg is 2.2 pounds. So we
Yeah.
go 68.7 times 2.2.
Is 151 pounds.
So there's 151 pounds of fat on Mary, okay, and she's 55%.
Now she's going to need some of that fat.
Yeah, so what we're about to
We're
do...
not going to take her right down to zero.
However, let's just
However.
take a consideration. Let's just take a moment to see the impact of this on Mary, okay? So we know that 1 pound of fat, okay, yields 3,500 calories. So now if I go 151
times 3,500.
times 3,500,
Are you ready for this? I had
You
to write
ready?
this one down.
guess what it is?
529,375
So
calories.
almost 530,000 calories
Yeah.
are stored inside that fat mass. Now that's a very...
It's a large amount of energy storage.
It's a large amount of energy storage, which effectively is what fat is. It's a storage of energy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now then,
We want to kind of
it's
see
kind
how
of
long
hard-
it would take.
Yeah. So obviously you're never ever going to take a client to 0% body fat. But what I wanted to do was to add some context, because a lot of people, I think, in today's world are after a transformation overnight. Okay, we got fast gratification. I can pick up the phone right now. I'm recording this, and by the end of this recording, in 20 minutes or whatever, I could have a Domino's pizza to my house.
Ooh,
I
shall
could,
we?
maybe. Okay, I could get any takeaway delivered to me, and I could get that immediate gratification. I could go and order something off of Amazon, and it could be here
next
by.
day?
Or even the same day potentially. Okay, so we live in this world of immediate gratification, and I think we've become used to, or a habit is there, of if I do some kind of weight loss approach, or I do a dietary approach, whatever it might be, I start exercising, I want to see a result instantaneously.
And it's actually not about that. It can take much longer. So let's see what
if we
happens
take
with Mary.
if we take Mary, for example, okay, and we were to do just a basic consultation, we'd probably find out that Mary has yo-yo dieted several times. Okay,
Yeah.
she's probably battled with weight for the majority of her life to get to this 125 kg point.
Yeah.
You don't get to 55% and 125 kgs overnight,
No.
and likewise you don't take it off overnight. So we're at 151 pounds or 530,000 calories stored.
Yes.
Okay, so
If Mary had a 400 calorie deficit every day,
so 400
that's
calories.
still quite a bit.
So we're talking about that could
And
be
I don't
from
I mean from her maintenance. I
Yeah.
don't mean from what she's consuming, which she's clearly consuming higher than,
because
to get to that
because
point.
if you
This
did
is from her maintenance.
Cool. So one of the tools I could use would be like a lifetime weight predictor chart, and I could look at significant times or years with Mary and plot her weight, and we would probably see if we had time along the bottom and weight going up, we'd probably see that weight was going up almost year on year on.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
we could clearly say that Mary is sitting in somewhat of a surplus. Some days or weeks might be maintenance, or she might be in a good place and is actually in a deficit. But on the whole, across the year,
She's probably on
in a surplus. So actually, we're talking about a 400 calorie deficit off
From
maintenance.
maintenance.
So actually, could be quite a big drop, because we've got to come from surplus to maintenance to 400
So
calories.
we've not picked a little goal here for her
No,
to keep
completely.
400 calories true deficit per day. This would take Mary to burn off her 529,000 calories, 1,325 days, which is 4 years.
Which is almost 4 years. It works out like something like 3.7 to 3.8 years.
Wow.
So that's assuming that Mary every day
Every day was in her 400 calorie deficit.
was 400 calories deficit below her TDEE. Yeah,
Maintenance,
which is a big ask.
It's a
So
big
you can
ask.
see now that yes, it's about a caloric deficit. Yes, it's about moving more. There's loads of that's what's going to be some of the key factors. But ultimately, in order for Mary to continue doing this for 1,300 days straight.
And 25.
And 25. Okay.
Don't miss that last month.
What we're really talking about here is a behaviour change.
And
Is
also,
an accountability program.
and throughout that, this will change as she goes through. So as her weight starts to drop, we then have to recalculate and find
completely.
where her new her new TDE maintenance is, and then from there drop down her 400 calories. So this is still super hypothetical, but
Massively
but
hypothetical.
so interesting to see how long it could take.
I think the
And it shows
message is it took a long time to put this weight on, and it's going to take a long time potentially to take this
Well,
off.
Mary could quite happily say that she achieved it over 4 years or so, probably of accumulative eating.
I'm going
or
to say it'd be
over-deficit.
way more than 4
Yeah.
years. From my knowledge of working with literally hundreds and hundreds of clients.
It's not overnight.
It's not overnight, and it's not an overnight transformation. So you might package up a 6 week or an 8 week or 12 week plan, and I think in that 8 weeks or 12 weeks, Mary's probably going to drop more than kind of 1 or 2 pounds per week. She's got more weight to lose from the early stages. She's probably going to be more engaged, more excited, more ready, more open, more willing.
And also have more availability to make change. So if she's not moving at the moment, it's easier to now get her to move.
Yeah,
and
you say that.
Well,
Yeah.
apologies. Even a small amount of movement creates more of a deficit.
That's the point.
Whereas
Yeah.
later on, if she's now regularly
Yes.
training 5 times a week, it's harder to now add in something else.
She's gone from literally going from nothing to even just going 1 or twice per week is a 200% increase.
Yeah.
But so
That's what I meant.
But it's not necessarily easy to get Mary to move. And so what we've got here is you might see some early big wins. Okay, so you might see some weight loss, you might see some fat mass loss, some muscle loss, some water weight loss, and overall you're going to see body weight drop.
Yeah.
However, but it's all very well, you get to the end of 12 weeks, you might see a drop in systolic blood pressure by 8 to 10 mmHgs, so milligrams of mercury.
Yeah.
You might see other health
her
predictor.
waist circumference coming in slightly.
Yeah, if you went
might see her cholesterol levels change,
completely.
her lipid profile change,
Completely. So you might see other health predictors.
pain coming off of her knees,
For wicked low back pain reducing subjectively.
insulin resistance changing.
Completely. And she could perhaps go to the doctor or nurse and have a health check at the beginning and end, and they could say over the 12 weeks you've had some incredible changes. And I've actually had a guy recently that I trained, and at the beginning he was type 2 diabetic as well, and at the beginning we got the sign off from the diabetic nurse, and we had a few other checks done. He was fit and ready to go, and then 12 weeks later he literally jumped straight into 3 sessions per week. These weren't radical sessions. You can only do what you can do. They were all body weight. It was kind of a HIIT circuit style of approach, but the beauty of what I love about body weight is you move at your pace. So you could have one person in a circuit going hell for leather, the other person doing the same exercises, but obviously appropriate to their range of movement, their intensities and whatnot.
Number of reps, speed.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not what this is about, I suppose, this FitPro session. But ultimately, 12 weeks later, this guy went back and the diabetic nurse literally said, I've never seen this level of action before. And so many of his health predictor markers had radically improved to the point some of his medication had started to change within 12 weeks, which was a massive boost for this guy because he was under the impression that it would only get worse.
Yeah.
And he'd been told by other healthcare professionals that, expect this dosage to go up. But and it had gone up historically. That was one of the catalysts to reach out to me in the first place. But 12 weeks on, some of his medication was coming down. Now he gets this kind of renewed energy to go at it again for another 8 to 12 weeks and he's continuing along that path.
It's fantastic, isn't it? The other thing I love about this is it shows the need for a different goal, a shorter goal. So if I turned around to Mary and said, 4 years, come on then, let's go. You're going to be, after a week, she's like, God, this deficit is killing me. Like, it's really hard work. I'm then saying, I want 4 years of this.
Monday to Sunday.
It's quite hard to stay focused.
Completely.
And can feel a bit grueling. Whereas chunking it down into a smaller goal, you can still see great results inside a smaller 4-week, 8-week, 12-week, 16-week program, which means that the client can be excited and celebrate that and know that they're moving in the right direction.
Now, with that, I think this leads really nicely on to, there was a study done in 2007, okay? And it had lots of, sponsors of this study, but it was very influential and it was called a Foresight report. And there's various other parts, there's hundreds of studies that went into this and various names associated to it. However, one of the things that came out of this was what was classed as a Foresight Map.
As in looking forward.
Looking forward. So I'm just going to grab this up on
So the Foresight Map shows
here.
all the different possible causes of obesity.
Completely. And literally thousands, tens of thousands of starting points were associated to what starts someone's obesity journey. So I'm just going to read off screen in front of me as kind of a cue. So we had food production, everything to do with food. So how it was produced, the macros.
The changes over time in terms of it becoming more processed, even down to how food production being more easy to access, like we said about Deliveroo earlier.
And there was hundreds of studies that correlated that someone's obesity journey would be to do with food production and food consumption, which is a given, I suppose.
Yes.
Okay.
Probably one of the first things you might have thought of was food related.
The next one, which I think most people would look at, would be activity. So again, the activity environment of
the environment and of the individual.
Yeah.
So the environment might be that we don't really cycle or walk to work anymore.
Yeah.
But that we actually drive or we sit on the tube or whatever.
But then the other side to that is you could say, well, actually the road network isn't very good for cycling, therefore that's why I don't cycle. So it was looked at all perspectives of this. It wasn't a case of I don't cycle to work. It was actually, well, we could look at the council structure and local council authority and say, well, the road network isn't suitable for cycling. That's why I don't. So it came at it from all angles. The next one was the individual psychology.
Yes.
So what's going on between the right ear and the left ear. And I think this is they're all fundamental, obviously, that's what came out of it.
This one's so unquantifiable in my mind. Like, there's so many different aspects of individual psychology that could influence why somebody would end up accumulating more fat on their bodies.
Completely. Why someone doesn't buy a bike, why someone believes that the roads aren't safe, why somebody
believes that obesity is the norm and that's okay. There's no problem with it.
Yeah, and it could be a whole host of things. It could be maybe they've experienced something, some kind of trauma, maybe it's just been a deep-rooted belief in the fact that, there's so many possible start points, and that's what this study came out with. So we won't go into them all, but
we also had social influence and biology as well.
And individual activity. So when you look at the Foresight Map, you can type this into Google, you can actually see all the possible start points of why someone started out their obesity journey or where they could have started, and you'll see that there's this plethora of studies and starting points, and no one journey is ever the same. And I think that's what I really want to highlight is whilst we sit here and we can say that energy balance is key and moving more is key. The very fact that someone's starting point could be in any one. Now, I could have 100 clients, and all 100 clients could be starting off in a different place.
Yeah.
Which why it comes back to it's a behavioural change process.
Absolutely. It's so important with behaviour change. And actually, when you look at the Foresight Map, I just look at all the lines that go in between all the different possible things, and you'll realise how many millions of different combinations, that's the word, to be able to understand what the cause might be.
Completely.
So we can't assume that the reason why Mary is 125 kilos and 55%
is because she eats too much.
What's the cause of that?
What's the cause of that? Completely.
And how does that relate to her socially, or her psychology, or her activity,
or her genetics, or her biology? Completely.
Absolutely.
And all the other external people associated to her journey.
Yeah.
Okay. I do think that a person needs to take ownership and responsibility. Definitely. However, that's part of our job as a fitness professional, health and fitness professional, to help them become accountable to themselves. And in the early stages, it's about having some external accountability, to have a wingman on their side and say, I've got you here. I've got the education, I've got the knowledge. Let me part that on you, slowly by slowly. Okay, a little bit becomes a lot. And over time, you will be able to have this internal ownership, accountability to do the work.
And I think also part of that as being a health and fitness professional is that being able to consult with them and dive deeper into why they've got to the position they're in.
You've teed up a treat because
it's not, don't judge a book by the cover, that's one problem for everyone.
Completely. So you've teed up really nicely.
Didn't
because
know I segued that one for you.
Thank you very much. So what I love about this is you could say, well, actually a lot of my education is going to be about moving more, getting my knee up, which is, don't get me wrong, I am all over that. And I think it's one of the highest values we should be heading towards. Certainly getting someone's non-exercise activity up. So more steps, for example. And getting them more active in the gym. However, don't underestimate the power of what I call head sessions. And this is something we teach inside the exercise referral, and more so the level 4 obesity, is understanding that actually your client might, for example, pay for a package where you work with them twice or 3 times a week, or even once per week. But inside that month, one of those sessions, 2 of those sessions, or potentially all of those sessions could be sitting down over a cup of coffee and truly establishing the root causes behind why they're in this position in the first place.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe that no client really needs me beside them next to a treadmill to get them going. Maybe some sessions, certainly in the early stages.
The impact of understanding that psychology side of things and their behaviour change and their sort of lifestyle processes, that it's not just about the 1 hour with you in the gym, it's also about the
I had one client, not too recently, a good couple of years ago, and we'd done a number of sessions out and about in the park. We'd had some great results, and it was probably about the 3rd or 4th mesocycle in, and we didn't really challenge food too early. One of the concepts I like to work on is, let's get one thing right first. So we focused on upping her steps and finding time in her day to actually take action that was achievable.
Yeah.
And then we moved on to more structured exercise. And it was a little bit into the program where we really started to dial into food. We had some modifiable changes early on, which was more than enough to yield a result. But after that, we started to, once we'd got good adherence, okay, and this client genuinely started to value exercise, because when they first started working with me, they didn't value it.
Yeah.
Okay. It was kind of like, I have to do this. Once it gets to that point of like, actually, I'm really looking forward to this, I get to do this, we started to challenge nutrition. And so the next session we went down to the local Sainsbury's and I did her food shop with her.
Yes, I remember.
And she said at the end of that was the best session she's ever had with a trainer, with a coach. And we sat down in the coffee shop after, and we had a cup of tea and a cake, oddly, because it was just a really nice finish point of like, do you know what? We can celebrate the wins we've had. I didn't want to demonize food or anything. And why can't we have a cake to celebrate?
I remember when you came out of this, you said that she was actually really embarrassed to start off with, that she'd gone through this many years of her life.
She was 67 years old.
Without ever understanding how to do a food shop.
She literally sat in the coffee shop. Okay, I'm actually getting like really emotional, actually, like goosebumps, because she literally sat there and pretty much cried that she'd learned so much and she didn't realise how to structure her weekly shop, how to structure her food, how to get a plan in place. And that was a mindset session. It had nothing to do with fizz, nothing to do with neat in the grand scheme of things.
And not really anything about calories.
And nothing
just
really
about preparation.
It was about preparation. It was life skills. It was the mindset behind shopping. It was the mindset of where do you start in the shop. Like one of the things on that Foresight report, in that map actually when it looked at food production, was actually the production setup of every major supermarket.
Yeah.
How you walk through the door and you get that
smell of
the
bread.
smell of bread. Okay, that's not from the bakery. You know that that's not actually a real smell. You get that, right? Okay, it's there to seed and plant emotional attachments to certain places. And you go in, and the first thing you see,
our local little Tesco's, they do all that, their croissants and stuff, and you walk in the morning,
it smells amazing, and immediately you're like, oh, I'm going to pick something up. Okay, and how the shop is laid out is very, very deliberate in terms of the psychology of habits and behaviors, of where you're going to pick stuff up, and your buying choice, your buying habits. And so I worked really closely with this client, whereby we deliberately went to start in a different place in the shop and go on a different route and change her habit. And she absolutely loved it. And it was easy for her after that, dare I say, it was easy for her to immediately challenge the way she shopped, which immediately challenged what was in her basket.
Does it also change the way she does other things?
Well, it immediately challenged the way where she put her shopping away. We even looked at where she put her food away at home.
Nice.
Because that, again, had emotional attachments to certain places with regards to where her grandchildren would come over and eat.
Oh, for sweets.
For sweets and whatnot. But there's lots of things I can do, tactics I can do, which back up behaviour change, which is the principle here.
Yeah,
Okay.
Lovely.
Does that make sense?
That's awesome. That's
Cool.
fantastic. I want to sort of go across to metabolic syndrome now.
Cool.
Now, metabolic syndrome includes everything we've already said about obesity. It includes obesity. It's actually a cluster of conditions, and that's obesity, diabetes, and hypertension. Now, diabetes we're going to talk about in more detail next week, and we spoke about hypertension on season 4, episode 2.
Yes.
So there's already a lot there. But what metabolic syndrome is it's essentially if you show 3 or more of these specific factors.
So there's 5 factors that make up metabolic syndrome.
And if you show 3 or more of those, then you're diagnosed as having metabolic syndrome.
So the first one...
Oh, one more thing.
Yeah.
Before we go there, 1 in 4 people in the UK have it.
1 in 4 people, which is, again, backs up the obesity numbers.
Very similar to the obesity numbers and the hypertension numbers.
Completely.
There's no coincidence there.
And also you could look at it and say, well, actually, somebody that's BMI 40 plus, the likelihood of them having metabolic syndrome or other comorbidities associated goes up. But that's not to say that somebody that's, say, BMI 31 doesn't have this.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
It's not just associated with the higher numbers.
Yeah.
So the first one of metabolic syndrome is obesity, and we could start to categorize obesity a little bit as well. So first off, we could look at central obesity.
Yeah, which is around the waist.
Which is around the abdomen, and then within that you would be really looking at visceral obesity. So we're talking about fat that is stored on the visceral.
Yeah.
Okay, in the abdominal cavity.
Around the digestive system.
And that's what's key here, is fat that's stored on the midsection, on the abdomen, in that cavity, is really close to your liver, your pancreas, your digestive system. And one of the things that, we won't go into great detail here, but one of the things that alarms me most about this fat here is it's got a plentiful supply of blood.
Yes.
The capillarization infiltrates the blood, in the fat rather, and it's got a plentiful supply. Now,
So it's really easy to get those fatty deposits into the bloodstream.
Which then leads on to
having high levels of triglycerides in the blood.
Which is another precursor.
It's one of the factors.
Which is high triglycerides.
And that actually leads to atherosclerosis, which we know links to hypertension, which we were talking about.
So atherosclerosis is the build-up of fatty plaque deposits on the artery walls, which scars the artery walls and builds up. And obviously blood's flowing downstream, down through the arteries. And as these fatty deposits build up and flow downstream, they can clog up, which could lead to a heart attack or stroke. Okay.
Exactly that.
So with that, you've also got a lowering of HDLs as well.
Yes, so they've got less HDLs in their blood lipid profile, basically, so that they're when we talked about hypercholesterolemia in season 4, episode 2, we were talking about that profile and understanding that HDLs are stimulated when we are more active, but they're also the ones responsible for cleaning up our arteries, essentially.
Yeah, completely.
So if they've not got many HDLs, that's going to compound the fact that this fatty deposits are laying down in the arteries.
Completely. And then the fifth and final one is looking at blood glucose levels.
Oh, yes, so insulin resistant, and also we didn't say blood pressure.
And blood pressure, completely, which we said. So just to recap those 5, first off, we're looking at obesity. Then we're looking at fasting blood glucose, so insulin resistance. Then we're looking at blood pressure. Then we're looking at high triglycerides and low HDLs.
Yes.
Okay, so those are the 5 kind of precursors for metabolic syndrome. Now, I want to go back to obesity because I feel like we rushed it. And I said about central obesity. I said about
different types of fat.
Visceral fat. I also want to talk about, and I talked about the abdominal obesity, so around that midsection. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is ectopic fat, which I've kind of already mentioned, but I want to give you that name. So ectopic fat is fat that is outside of the adipose tissue.
So normal adipose tissue, we would relate to, say, subcutaneous fat. Like, you know, when you do a skin fold test on somebody, you're like, well, that's their fat in their subcutaneous adipose tissue.
So you've got adipose tissue, which is made up of adipocytes, and that's where we deposit and store fat. We hoard fat, okay, and that's a fat storage. That's there for energy, insulation, protection, and within that you've then got ectopic fat. So this is fat outside of.
So it's not in the adipocytes anymore. This is outside of the adipocytes, and it means it's inside other types of tissues. So it could be inside the liver, inside the muscle, inside around the heart. So these ectopic fat storage can cause massive implications down the line, and that's because the fat isn't supposed to be stored around the heart. It's not supposed to be stored in the liver. You're going to have
some fat around the. You are going to have
but
fat.
But large amounts of this can cause huge problems.
Completely. Which could change the many functions of the organ that it's attached to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can lead to organ failure.
So, for example, you got a non-fatty alcoholic liver disease.
Yeah.
Okay. When you look at somebody that's overweight and obese and has got large amounts of fat around the liver, it's the same amount of fat that somebody that's, say, been a chronic alcoholic all their life.
Non-alcoholic fatty liver.
There you go. I got my words out. I can feel my voice.
You're like, I think I've got the right words.
Completely. My voice came out, the words came out the wrong way around. But we got there in the end. And so the functionality of these organs is actually hindered by the amount of fat around them. I mean, we're going to talk about diabetes next week.
We've got a long time off.
Completely. It is next week. And we're talking about, we're going to see fat accumulating around the pancreas.
And starting to see problems with kidneys and how organs can start to deteriorate.
Completely over time.
And we'll also talk about that in relation to insulin resistance, which is one of the metabolic syndromes.
Yes.
In terms of how we can recognise insulin and blood glucose levels in the blood.
Completely.
Yeah. So essentially, so they're the different types of fat to be aware of. So now you can see that if your client loses weight, fat in particular, and they start to become more active, these little risk factors we said for metabolic syndrome start to decrease, which means that they have a massive compounding effect. Now, the dangers with metabolic syndrome is that if they have all three conditions that it's associated
Or more.
to, yeah, exactly, not the three factors, but three conditions, so obesity, diabetes and hypertension, if they've got those that they're associated to, their risk of coronary heart disease, stroke. Type 2 diabetes, all of that goes up. So all the complications that go with that, heart attack, all of those different complications increase on their risk.
There's a few things I want to talk about, I suppose. But the first thing is, this is a health-related goal. And it's really hard to feel that you're making progress because the client can't necessarily see. They can see the number on the blood pressure machine coming down.
All the scales.
And obviously they're going to feel maybe less out of breath walking up the stairs. They might get better quality sleep. They might be able to pinpoint 2 or 3 areas. But ultimately, so many people are going to be fixated on, I don't feel like I'm getting fitter. I don't feel like I'm losing weight, or the scale weight isn't coming down.
Even
however,
down to, hold on, before you go to however, even down to the skin fold site, that's just the subcutaneous. Remember Neale mentioned about visceral would be around the waist circumference.
And that's my point, is we know we can't spot check fat. We can't say, I want to lose fat off of my tricep, or I want to lose fat off my love handles, okay, or my suprailiac, But the body's going to start from taking away the highest risk.
Yeah.
So from my experience and what I've read in research is we're going to see, as we start to improve our diet and start to move more, whether that's structured or non-structured, we're going to see fat come down off the visceral first, okay, off of the higher risk areas. So at the end of 4-8 weeks, the client could be like, it doesn't feel like I've made much progress. However, when you look at the health predictor side of things, they could be making radical progress. But I think that is actually why some people fall off the rails as well. Yeah. Because they're after...
well, they can't see that the fat's gone down from around their heart, for example.
No, completely. And there's no way of us ever checking for that in the grand scheme of things. No. So I dare I say it's about trusting the process and finding as many tactical ways to keep them inspired, keep them on track,
celebrate every win.
And celebrate every win. But also remembering back that this is a behaviour change issue.
It is.
Okay, it's about keeping yourself, the client, on track in spite of very few physical numbers changing.
And it's over such a long period of time. I think that's my big takeaway from today, is that it's a behaviour change issue and it's over such a long period of time that it can't be anything but behaviour change.
Completely.
And I find that I still now find that as a big takeaway for me, because so often when I think about obesity, I just think calorie deficit, that's it.
Yeah, completely.
And it's not just that.
So
what's your big takeaway?
Well, I don't think we're necessarily at the takeaway part, are we?
I thought we were.
Oh, maybe. What I think is, like, from a behaviour change, it's one of those words that gets thrown around, but actually what is behavioural change? And I think, one of the things that I like to focus on here is our understanding of communication. It's our understanding of words. It's our understanding of language. And I think if we can understand language at a deeper level as a FitPro, then we can start to impact behavioural change.
Massively.
So
that's interesting.
Some of the principles behind that could be cognitive behavioural therapy, could be motivational interviewing, it could be NLP, so neuro-linguistic programming. But ultimately, all of these, they're principles, but also tactics, have this global heading for me of how do I communicate with a client? How do I talk to the client? How do I see life through the client's eyes? If I was to step into Mary's shoes and truly understand what life is like for one day, okay, I would have a lot more empathy. I'd have a lot more understanding of what I need to do as a health FitPro right now. And how am I going to deliver that? We talked about on many of our courses, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I think that's what behaviour change is.
Nice.
Okay, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I think moving forwards, this understanding of behavioural change is, for me, it's about genuinely being there for the client all the time. Okay.
When you were saying it's not what you say, it's how you say it. To me, that also relates to what the client is doing. So it's not necessarily what they're doing, it's how they do it as well.
It's how they do it. Because I've worked with so many clients now, and this isn't, I don't want this to be a derogatory sounding comment. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Okay. towards, say, the health world. But ultimately, I've had so many clients come out of a GP or consultant appointment and they haven't understood what's been said. Okay. And I've lost track of the amount of times that I've sat down and we've discussed what was said, or I've been there in the GP's room with them. Okay. And then broken that down, like almost with Crayola crayons to go, this is actually what's going on. And there's so much confusion. There's so much confusion. But I think that's why it's hard to get going out the gates, or for the client to place a huge amount of value and priority on what this actually means for their quality of life. And I think, from my experience, the Health FitPro right now genuinely is in the trenches, and they're the first person, maybe not the first actually, maybe one of the only persons to truly sit down. And do you know what? The biggest value I feel I give is my time. It's the time with them, that questioning, that listening, being able to just be there and educate. Just to be there completely and truly understand, well, what does that information mean to the client? In and out of a GP surgery for 10 minutes isn't necessarily completely. And you know, this conjures up a couple of memories actually. I worked with one client and he was incredibly overweight and obese. And from memory, it's about BMI 48. Right. Now, this person used to fall over 2 or 3 times per day. Wow. Okay. And at this point, I always wondered why their knees ached early on, or why they had bruises on their hip or whatever, or why they couldn't move in a certain way. And it wasn't until we truly sat down quite early on in the program and opened up and built up this relationship, enough rapport build, enough customer service skills for this client to open up, that I found out what life was like on an average day. Wow. And it's so eye-opening to consider that someone that's overweight, obese, BMI 35, 40 plus, will fall over daily. Well, I don't fall over around the house. I can't really remember the last time I fell over, other than like acting like a kid and running up the stairs, like chasing you or something, or running around with the nieces or whatever. Yeah. But tripping over your feet running or whatever it might be. That's the next point, really. I asked, where do we fall over? And it really was basic places around the house, around the workplace, where they couldn't see the feet. Okay, because of that apron of consideration, of volume in front of them. And then it made me consider about my exercise selection. Now it made me consider about my training systems and my work to rest ratios. Feet hip width apart, facing forwards. They probably can't even see that. Well, yeah, completely. Like to know that's the case. So I had some really, I'm going to say, quite tough love questions, and I said to this client, I remember I said, when was the last time you actually saw your feet? And he was like, probably back when I was in my mid-teens. Wow. And this guy's, in his mid to late 40s. So we really did dig into kind of what life has been like across 2 or 3 decades, but also in a 24-hour period. What does he go through? And that only comes from the questioning. And it's completely. And I think behaviour change really is a true understanding, a true empathy, a true place or space and time for you as a FitPro to really appreciate the client's world. And I think that's what behaviour change is. Now you're on the same wavelength, now you're on the same connection, and now I'm going to be so much more smarter in my planning, so much more smarter in my exercise selection, my work to rest ratios, my understanding of why this exercise is a good exercise but actually for this client doesn't work, or how that goes against their medication or the advisories from their physio or whatever. So now I can get a really, really smart plan where they turn up and go, do you know what, Neale's got my back. I know it's going to be tough. No one said it was going to be easy, but I know that Neale's got my back, or my FitPro person's got my back. They've got my 6, they've got my wingman, and they're going to make it the best session. And I get to do this. I genuinely deep down know they look forward to it because of that. You're their wingman, you're there. As opposed to seeing... There's no judgment. Yeah, like there's zero judgment. And I think that's what we talk about, being client-centered.
The other thing that came up for me when you were saying that is...
Feels like I've just waffled and rambled.
No, I love it. It's really good because it was nice hearing about your client as well. But the other thing that came up for me is that understanding of when they're obese, the other risks that have come out of this, the risk factors that have all fallen into place, means it's actually a very serious condition. Whereas so often people go, well, they're just a little bit overweight, I'll work with them anyway. I'll work with them in the same way as everyone else. And actually that's not the case, because the risk is so much higher. Like you said, in terms of falling over, seeing their feet, it's not just those types of things. It's also what's going on inside that we can't see.
Completely. And that's not just saying that that's somebody that's on the higher end of a BMI spectrum. I've worked with so many people, BMI low to mid 30s, BMI 30 to 34.
32.
Yeah, that have so many other quality of life implications throughout their day that perhaps they're not even aware of. And I've helped them articulate that, or they've not even told their closest loved ones for a whole host of reasons.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think, you know, I've got another client, not too recently, but what we did was we actually helped change the layout of some of the places they fall around the house.
Nice.
So we understood that actually they fall in the hallway, they fell just coming out of the kitchen, and there was one place upstairs they fell. And then I kind of thought, well, hold on a minute, if we're falling over in these 3 locations a lot, okay, what could they hurt themselves on as they fall? And do they have access to somebody to help them up?
Nice.
And in all 3 of these places that this client fell, the answer was yes, they could have easily banged their head. There was easily places to hurt their hip and their knees
and things,
but also there was no access to, say, a mobile phone or getting some help. And on one instance, this poor lady had fallen over just as she was waving goodbye to her husband at work, and waited there until he got back some 9-10 hours later.
Oh, wow.
And so we, you know, again, I think
things we take for granted. Well, if I fell over, I'd just get back up.
And you could say, you know, well, is that health and fitness? But if we put that 6-letter word of health beforehand, before fitness industry, health and fitness industry, really what I'm saying is I'm there for the client's physical well-being, I'm there for their mental well-being, I'm there for their spiritual well-being, their nutritional well-being. Therefore, I'm a coach, I'm not a personal trainer. I'm here to coach the client. Now, if this client falls over a lot, they're less likely to turn up to my physical sessions. If this person's in pain, they're more likely to binge eat, to feel better, or whatever their reasoning is. If this person does fall over a lot, they might break their knee. Now they're out the game for good. It's up to me as the health and fit pro
to look at the health first,
to oversee the whole thing and coach them and say, how do I help you turn up 3, 4, 5 times a week? How do I get you on board that you feel I get to do this, I don't have to do this? Yeah.
I mean, it's so powerful.
Completely. And
fantastic.
And I think over the global heading, certainly for the more higher risk, is how do I improve your quality of life? Because now this person falls over, and they can pull themselves back up just by a simple layout design of their house.
But also the other problems about being there on the floor all day, apart from sort of the humiliation of needing to go to the toilet and things like that, but also they've not consumed any food for the day. So what's the knock-on effect of how that affects? They're not drunk any water all day. What's the knock-on effect?
Yes.
If somebody is larger and they find it hard getting up and down from their office desk, they might not get up to then go and have a walk around at lunch, or to get food, or to get drink, in which case they might just binge out in the evening.
Completely.
There is so many more knock-on effects than we might first think about. And I think that only comes from a coaching perspective and that behaviour change focus to put that health first.
I think, I know we're this is going to be quite a long episode, but I'm okay with this. I think there just needs to be a short discussion on maybe exercise and medication as well.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so let's take a client that is overweight and obese, okay? We can't make the assumption that they could squat or they could lunge.
Yes. But first of all, it's the mechanical differences, even in walking gait. So if you're, next time you're out and about and you are looking around and you see somebody that is obese and quite obviously obese, have a look at how they move. Instead of this forward locomotion from the hips and the normal sort of rotation from the spine that goes with that for contralateral movement, you'll see more of a rolling and a rocking motion, where they're having to shift the weight from one foot to the other.
So walking
they're
is sagittal.
unstable.
So walking is sagittal.
Yeah.
Yet if you watch somebody or look at somebody that's and actually what we used to do on the physical level for attendance days is actually we used to have an obesity fat suit. So that weighed an additional 40 kgs, and it was a big volume, and it was a massive eye opener to wear these suits. Behind closed doors and truly analyze human movement, because sagittal walking, it's sagittal, and yes, you are going to get elements of transverse and frontal in any muscle we train.
Absolutely.
We can't assume that just because the adductors are duct, the adductors still go through transverse and have an impact on the hip. The adductors can still go through frontal and have an impact on the hip. However, if you watch somebody walk that's BMI 45, for example, you're going to see that they really have to utilize frontal and transverse planes to move forwards.
Yeah. And that's because that lack of balance necessarily for the volume that they have and stability across the locomotion
you're going to see
forward.
Knees knocking in or bow-legged or out.
So the overall alignment of the body changes as a result, not just of the fat mass around it, but how that weight is distributed around the body. So that changes the gait. And if it changes something as simple as walking, then you know squats, lunges, a leg press, getting into a chest press machine that's very close could be really tricky. So range of movement is a huge aspect to not only consider of like they can or can't do this, but how do I adapt and how do I observe and correct to make sure that I'm doing the best thing to not make their conditions worse. Or now give them arthritis in areas.
Or whatever, or just to give them real bad joint pain. Like let's think of this, like water runs downhill in the least path of resistance, and as does body weight under gravity. Okay, so the body is going to find positions that offer the least path of resistance. So this skeletal system for this 6'2" guy in a healthy BMI range, let's just say is 85 kg. Now let's take this same guy that's BMI 40, for example, and weighs in at 140 kgs, some 50 kgs more than their lean counterpart is handling. Okay, so now gravity is now forcing this additional 50 kgs down, and it's finding the least path of resistance. So you're going to see a whole cascade from the foot to the tip of the head and the shoulders, from the shoulders and head down to the tip of the feet change. So you're going to see from the feet up, you might see a difference in their foot. You might see a difference in
the knee,
the flat feet. You might see a difference in external rotation from the ankle, external rotation from the knee, external rotation from the hip, a wider stance. You're going to see maybe an anterior tilt of the pelvis, which cascades all the way up the spine, maybe into a hunched position. Like you're going to see
the shoulders,
protraction of the shoulders,
the chin poking
forwards. You're going to see tighter muscles in the neck, and all because of the weight of the fat distribution around them, pulling them into this position. And so we really need to be mindful that, yes, we want to challenge them from a postural perspective. We want to get them moving. We know we've got to get their heart rate up. But at the same point, we want to be selecting exercises that actually encourage good movement, good posture towards that. But recognize that Rome wasn't built in a day, but understand that the range of movement is going to be your biggest issue.
Yes.
And so, just placing a client of BMI, even 30 plus, doesn't matter, into a standard boot camp set of circuit exercises could be the worst thing for them.
Yeah. And also,
unless that boot camp or that circuit or that approach actually sits down and truly understands what this client can and can't do, and understands all the possible regressions of that exercise, that says this is your starting point.
And I want to highlight something here, is that it's not necessarily about contraindicated exercises, because there's not necessarily a pool of exercises for obesity that someone cannot do.
No.
Instead, it's a relationship between the condition and other risk factors they may have that might be diagnosed or undiagnosed. We know that if they are obese, they are more likely to have hypertension. We know that if they're obese, they're more likely to be at risk of heart attack and stroke.
Yeah.
And all the other issues with insulin resistance and triglycerides, all of these different problems.
So stressful isometric positions,
So the
or
things that we
overhead,
put in
or
place-
change in planes of movement, or change in postural hypertension, where you're going from standing, seated, lying quickly,
Yeah.
a PHA circuit. Now, what
So you almost apply the contraindications from those conditions that are linked, which means that there is so many more complexities to obesity than just the range of movement.
Now, I also want you to consider that whilst there's not necessarily exercises that are contraindicated to obesity, I know firsthand from certainly my early days where I didn't deep dive or research or know enough about this particular population of people, that the psychological impact of a session of a particular exercise could be the difference between the client staying or coming back.
Yeah.
And that is, dare I say, the number one thing on my list.
I would say
know,
humiliation is contraindicated.
yeah, the guilt, the shame, whatever. There's lots of words associated to that are conjured up for a client, and everyone's an individual. But if I thought, and I was like, right, what would be the biggest win for a client in this session would be, did they enjoy it, and are they coming back?
Yeah.
We do more of the things we enjoy. So if I know that the client is enjoying themselves, then their likelihood of coming back goes up.
Yes.
And like we saw earlier, Mary needs to show up every single day for 4 years.
Yeah, she does.
So when it comes to exercises or contraindicated exercises for obesity, not considering all the comorbidities, which we have to do, actually the number one thing is the psychological impact of that.
And
Individually,
the things that you
on the
think...
exercise, sorry to jump in, on the group, their comparisons,
Yeah.
and it's making sure that you are with them.
And quite often I've heard people say, well, I've programmed all this high intensity work because they need to get a calorie deficit in order to lose their fat. That's their goal. But actually, remember that calorie deficit comes from other areas as well.
Yeah.
You're actually the behaviour change
Yeah.
approach of having an enjoyable session that supports their self-efficacy
Yes.
would have a much greater compounding effect over
Beautiful.
time
Yeah, completely.
than one beasting session that would burn, in theory, more calories. Whereas you could then just include more steps in the day somewhere else,
you know what?
or tweak the food.
You can't. I've had
not just
far
about
more
beasting.
client successes.
Yeah.
Okay, whereby we focused on neat and we focused on modifiable changes to someone's diet,
rather than that beasting.
or not even just
session.
beasting, but just, dare I say, just structured exercise. To be honest,
Yeah.
there was far more wins across a longer period of time. But the biggest win was they got more active quickly over time, which did reduce their weight, which improved their self-efficacy, their self-confidence, and in time joined in other circuit or other approaches, a whole body approach in the gym or out in the park. But the prerequisite to that was 4-6 weeks of hitting, to start off with, a few thousand steps per day, 5,000 steps per day, 8,000 steps per day. And slowly by slowly, logical progression got them to that starting point. I don't want to have that assumption that just because they want to lose some weight or improve their health, then the starting point is to get active in the gym straight away.
There's so many other variables
Completely.
to still tackle
So
first. In the same way the Foresight report showed there's loads of causes, there's actually loads of solutions.
And loads of starting points. There's loads of starting points of why somebody is obese and overweight in the first place and has metabolic syndrome. And there's also loads of places to start their journey to reverse that.
I love that.
What an ending.
Right.
I think that summarises it nicely.
I think that really does. We didn't necessarily highlight much about medications and treatments.
Yeah.
And what I want to say is that this necessarily isn't the first port of call anymore for the doctors and healthcare environment. They don't necessarily send you away with an orlistat pill, go and have this and it'll block your fat absorption. It's not really necessarily about that anymore, and it is a long way down the line before people can get any kind of restrictive band surgery in terms of restriction on their digestive system.
Yep.
And
But
bypasses.
I
and
want to
things.
have that. I'm prepared to extend this podcast
Yeah,
a little
you're
bit
okay
further,
with
like
that?
to a degree, because also I think that
We talk about this in massive detail on our level 4.
Yeah, because when I've sat down, I've taught that course face to face. I don't know. I must have helped qualify well over 1,000 level 4s.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of conversations, and overall the feel or theme I get at the beginning of a course is very much anti-bariatric surgery, very much anti a banned or restrictive process on the digestive system, or very much anti-medication for this. And I just want to kind of like just add some bigger picture empathy in here, that is recognised as part of an approach of tackling obesity.
Yeah.
And to date, dare I say, that bariatric surgery has actually got incredible research behind it of the long-term impact it does have on an individual's health and obesity.
And it breaks the cycle. So if somebody's in a cycle or a spiral of their habits and behaviours, like Neale was saying, then it can be very difficult
and
to
somebody
break that.
doesn't get there through paying and going overnight. You know what I mean? There's a lot of processes
it doesn't
and
get to
steps
operation
to
until
get
then.
there to qualify for that. So I don't want to stay here too long, but I also just want to add that actually that is part of the process of tackling this major issue, which, dare I say, you know, in amongst a COVID-19 pandemic, I'd also say we do have an epidemic of obesity. It's an ever-growing issue on a global scale, and I don't think it gets the awareness that so many other conditions have, and it deserves it. It really does, because I think that obesity is the catalyst of many other conditions, as we've seen: stroke, heart attack, hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, and those types of things. So they're the catalyst to so many other: low back pain, mental health, you name it, it's there. Like for me, obesity is, if I had all of the conditions, I would see obesity in the middle, and I could see not necessarily a cause and effect on all of them, but I could certainly see relationships with all of them.
It's comorbidities.
If I put, for example, I don't know, hypercholesterolemia in the middle, I wouldn't necessarily see all the others. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
if I put
absolutely.
arthritis in the middle, I wouldn't necessarily see all the others.
And I think, again, that comes back to what I said about earlier, is that so many times obesity is seen as something that, it's okay, they're just a little bit overweight, they don't actually have any other risks.
Or that bariatric surgery, that was the easier option out. And I have worked with people with a band, and I've worked with people that have had surgery, and I'm telling you now, that is not the easiest option. I'm going to say, like, straight up, I'm going to say that's one of the hardest options. One of the hardest options to get to that point, and then to get on an operating table knowing that there is a risk of death in this based on starting point and the risks associated with surgery. That's not easy decisions to make. And it's about, again, behaviour change to get there, behaviour change of getting through that surgery, and behavioural change to coach and hold someone accountable after that to do the work.
Which is why it's something we focus on in the level 4 obesity and diabetes. So becoming an obesity specialist follows the exercise referral path really nicely. But at that point, you learn about what that really means in terms of gastric bariatric surgery, but gastric balloons, gastric bypasses, how that then relates in with medications, but what you can and can't do with somebody after that point.
Yeah.
And I will say that it's not something to be playing at if you're brand new as a FitPro and don't have that knowledge of the exercise referral and level 4 obesity, because there's so many intricacies and things to consider.
Completely. And whilst, I build on that, like, whilst it appears that we're doing good, we don't have the full picture of truly the skill set, the toolbox. The health and fitness professional has a toolbox, as far as I see. And, you know, there's lots of tools in this. So these advanced specialisms allow you to put extra tools in your toolbox to go, that's how I build this level of empathy. Those are the world-class questions I'm going to ask. This is how I'm going to support the client. This is how I'm going to hold them accountable. And that's when the tactics come out. But first, you must have a principle, which is the tool itself.
Exactly.
Cool. I think we kind of touched on so many
I'm impressed
areas.
with your voice.
It's held out quite well.
It's held out quite well.
It's held out quite well.
And I think we really wrap up there. So what I would love to hear is what your big takeaway is from this. So there is a lot of information.
It felt
in
like
this
we
podcast.
could keep talking and talking.
I know, but we've done a full qualification on this.
Yes.
So you could talk for days and days about
Which
it.
I have.
Which we don't need to do right now.
No, completely.
What I want to hear is your takeaways. What is your big takeaway from today? What's the one thing you're going to take and go and do or go and apply?
And you could, I'd really like you to actually, if you're listening to this, to take a quick selfie of you listening to this, okay, and then place it on maybe your Instagram or Facebook stories. If you're inside our Facebook in a circle, you can tag us in there. You don't have to put a picture in, of course. You could just write a quick comment and say, this was my big takeaway. But I think that's the key. Is these FitPro sessions, it's all very interesting and useful, but it only becomes really interesting and super, super useful when you can extract the lesson. So what was the lesson you got from this? What was the learning you got?
Yeah.
And let us know.
Yeah, I'd love that.
And of
also,
course,
if you're on iTunes, then you can leave us a 5-star review as well. If you're on any of the other platforms, make sure you subscribe and comment and hit like.
And outside of that, we will see you next week, next Thursday,
Diabetes.
which is all about diabetes. And we will have to bring up some things around obesity for that, insulin resistance, and we might even have to pick up some bits on metabolic syndrome as well to get there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like 2 episodes for 1 or 2 big conditions.
Yeah.
So have a wicked week ahead, and we will see you on the next FitPro session.
See you soon.
See you later.
Hi, I'm Neil Bergman.
And I'm Hayley Bergman. Over the last 10 years, we've helped thousands of fitness professionals to get qualified, learn with simplicity, and coach clients with confidence.
We're the first to say that learning and being a FitPro doesn't have to be hard work, and that with the right structure, support and resources, you can become a confident and knowledgeable fitness professional that is dedicated to more.
So how do you learn, qualify and kickstart as a FitPro? This is the FitPro Sessions Podcast with Parallel Coaching.